Hey guys, it is Tuesday and we're glad to be here. This is the inaugural edition of Vulnerability Matters, and we're going to take you on a journey in this series that we have. And we're going to be talking about a lot of things in relation to your skills, your skill set, putting them in maybe courses and curriculum, and maybe teaching others what you know. And also, why this always is a business proposition to make profit off of it. And we're going to tell you how to do it. We're going to describe some of the things that make it work. We're going to talk about it. And I got a lovely, lovely lady here with me today. And yes, I can put her on here because she's helping me with my courses. And she's telling me how you can have knowledge that sells. And the essence of sales, we know we have to talk about business and the logistics of it, but we're just talking about expressing your knowledge, making impact, and giving that to people in a format where they can learn. And not only can they learn, they can probably take what you have and spread it, because knowledge is great when others have it in order to do things and make impacts themselves. Right. So I want to thank everybody that is joining us live. Please do put in the comments where you're tuning in from, any questions that you have. Drop them in the comments because we want to know and we want to hear from you. But now that we get all the housekeeping out the way, I can bring on my fabulous guest. What's up, Kelly? Miss Kelly
Hello.
Tenney, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm so glad to be here. Very
Yes.
excited for this conversation.
Yes, this is a conversation that we definitely need to have, and this is our inaugural edition of Vulnerability Matters. It's something that I always talk about. It's something that is near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I think everyone really needs to embrace. And when I say that, there's degrees to this or level to this, as we used to say in sports, right? It's levels to this, but there is very much usefulness in that in changing the narrative of what vulnerability means. So
Mhm.
tell the people a little bit about you, Miss Finney. Tell them about you.
So, in a nutshell, I am an educator. I actually taught seventh grade health out here in California for 15 years. And
Mhm.
on that journey, I realized that the content that we were teaching in the public school system wasn't friendly to all of our students. And so I pursued my master's in education in curriculum and instruction. I really wanted to know what the framework was around curriculum and how we could develop better curriculum to really meet the needs of all of the diverse learners. And I went on to oversee all of the health curriculum for my school district, which was Long Beach Unified School District, one of the largest districts out here in California. Um, and then life started happening, kids started happening, my kids started getting older, and I really had the desire to find other ways to generate revenue without having that 9 to 5 job. And so that catapulted me into the entrepreneurial space. And one of the first things I think that many entrepreneurs do is they look for information and ways to learn about how they need to be a successful entrepreneur. And in doing that, I started taking online courses, and I realized that not all of them were set up in ways that were really conducive to their participants seeing success and even being able to complete the course. And my education hat would always be like, oh, if they just added this, like that would really have helped. Or if they had just put this in there, I probably would have finished the course, right? How many courses do we buy where we don't finish them? Um, and so that's kind of where Teacher Brilliance was born, was really recognizing that I have a really unique perspective from the educational standpoint to be able to bring into the entrepreneurial space to really help people amplify the education that they are providing. Um, because, I really think there's so much expertise and knowledge out there, and we could really shift the access that people have to quality learning experiences. And so I just love being in the space. I love, meeting experts like you who talk about amazing things like vulnerability. But
Yes.
that's kind of what has put me here where I am today.
Yeah, it's fascinating because we all, when we think about sharing our knowledge, And I know when I came into the vulnerability space, I was always sharing knowledge, right? I
Hmm.
think all of us have at some point in time.
Hmm.
We didn't necessarily have a directive way to do it.
Right.
So, like maybe we were mentoring, maybe we were speaking, maybe we were training, maybe we were just working side by side with coworkers.
Hmm.
Maybe you were, onboarding people that started working with you, and you were showing them a job so you could do something else. I think we've all came into that category at some point
Hmm.
in time, but entrepreneurship has been to such a big boom now, with the great resignation, if you really want to call it, because I think a lot of people were fed up for so many years
Yeah.
with some of the jobs they had. And I just think that courses was one of the things that people first jumped off the cliff with. And when I
Yeah.
say that, there was not a lot of direction in that, but there were to some point proof that if you had a course, some people took it, it was a way of getting revenue, right?
Yes.
So of course, us as entrepreneurs, we're thinking about how can we get the fastest revenue. But I took in some of those courses, and I got aligned with some, and LinkedIn offers a lot of them, right?
Yeah.
But I've gotten in the line with people to say, "Yo, I got this course, I want to take this," and I've been sort of like the guinea pig, for lack of a better word, and taking their stuff, and it has not pushed me to the level which I thought it was,
Hmm.
or it hadn't given me the outcome or the achievement of which I was looking for. And I think a lot of times when we go and jump into these courses with this conundrum of just, okay, I'm gonna learn something here,
Yeah.
we don't finish it all. The curriculum is maybe not what we need.
Yeah.
And how do you kind of like put that together in a form or fashion where people say, I got this idea because you're working with me, and this is the platform we really want to engage in.
Yeah.
You're working with me, and you liked what I have, and I've been writing stuff for so long. How did you just look at some of the things I said and kind of like walk through? Like, I think you got some great stuff here.
I think the biggest thing that people, the initial step that people miss is that traditionally all of the experts that have come out and have been talking about online courses, and in fact, I won't name any names, but I just saw an ad that said, if you have a computer and content, you can create a course. And I was like, well,
Mm,
not quite, right? And I think that's what traditionally people have taught. If you have content, if you have something to teach, create a course. It's a great way to generate revenue, to have a digital product, to have an evergreen stream of revenue. And yes, but one of the things, to answer your question, that I think people often miss is that it's really about what your audience wants to know. It's not about what you can teach or what you want to teach, right? And I think that's the misstep. And so coming to working with you, being able to look at your stuff, I think one of my superpowers is being able to recognize that is what people actually want to know. Being in the entrepreneurial space, you're obviously, you network, you watch other people's stuff, you're very active on social media and platforms. You can see conversation, right? And so I can see like, oh, there's a lot of people talking about that, or there's a lot of people talking about this. And I really can help fine tune that this is what I think people want to know. And recognizing that for many people, like you, where you're like, I'm ready to just come out with my first course, recognizing that in terms of a sales funnel,
mm, mm,
it really has to be like foundational thought changing information that's going to pull people into your space. And so a lot of people just go, I'm going to tell you everything that you need to know about, using vulnerability in leadership. But the real answer is, if people don't even understand why vulnerability matters, then they're never going to take your course. Right. And so it's really about being savvy about fine tuning, what do people really want to know? And, like we're talking about, for the people who are just starting to have conversations with you, in your case, it's just talking about, what is vulnerability? How do you find it? Why is it beneficial? Why should you bother? And it's really about scaffolding the content and the information that people have, recognizing it doesn't all just go into one piece.
Yeah, the important thing of that, and a lot of things you look at when you come from a perspective of knowledge, you just want to put it out there, right? Because
Yes.
you know something, and whether you call yourself an expert, whether someone has deemed you to be versus what you've put out or what you've taught someone, you kind of
Hmm.
take that as kind of like a badge of honor and say, okay, this is something that I think others would benefit from.
Right.
And in my experience of working with that, when I talk about vulnerability and we're talking about that now, when I thought about what is vulnerability, I took it to, of course, we went to the dictionary route of that, and it's just the quality pretty much of the state of just being exposed or
Mhm.
maybe harmed. And when I really digest that in a package for me, right?
Yeah.
I didn't think about it from that perspective. And I say, how many people are falsely taking on this definition of vulnerability and applying it to their lives? And this is no knock on anyone, because most of the times if we don't understand a word, we look for the dictionary to tell us what that means, and then we think that that's applicable to our lives. And I
Hmm.
never thought of words in that way, and I think that's what really kind of separated me from not just great thinker in the mindset of what I thought of myself. It's just that me having an understanding of what words mean are totally different to how words are applied.
Hmm.
And us as people, we haven't been taught that. And I don't know, that's a special gift that I have. I don't apply words what they mean to how they apply to me, because they can be two totally different things. And when I thought about vulnerability, I said, this is the key that I can get people to understand that the definition is not applicable to everybody. So, though you may know what it means, and across globally, we understand if we look it up, everyone will see this definition of. But
Hmm.
what makes me vulnerable is not the same thing that makes you vulnerable.
Hmm.
And what applies in that instance is that I can be vulnerable in settings and different places and with different things. You may not like none of those things, none of those places fit you, and you won't be vulnerable with anything.
Right.
So when we look at it as that, I see it as no harm, you see it as all harm. So I
Hmm.
think once we get the understanding of what people really need to understand about vulnerability, what it really is a narrative to each and every individual. And the key to it is that I've always thought was kind of like funny to me in excess. Vulnerability is your power. I'll say that again because I don't think people believe that. Vulnerability is your power. You can give it as you want. You can sit it out as you want. It can be a part of you as you want. You can give out as much as you like, as less as you like. But yet and still, we have people that's external tell us how to give that out internal. It's amazing.
I love that. And I love that you left that with us. Vulnerability is our power, because I think when we go back, and this is why I love what you talk about, because when people go back to the dictionary definition of vulnerability, I'm, what I can say is when I see that word exposed, that's where it feels scary,
Mhm.
right? And so you really changing the conversation around moving that textbook definition of vulnerability into recognizing that it is our power. I think that's such a transformational conversation that you've been having, and just a transformational thought process, changing it from vulnerability as being something that's bad and scary to really recognizing that it's something that you can own and something that can be very empowering. And so, I love that. And I don't think a lot of people talk about that. I think they view it as the scary piece. Why do I want to be exposed? Why do I want to expose myself? But you bring
Mhm.
such light to what the depths of vulnerability actually mean.
And I think and I appreciate that the conversations that we had, and these are not beginner conversations, right? Vulnerability is a touchy subject, and especially how I impart that in leadership and how that is so against the grain in
Hmm.
everything that our thought process tells us about that. But I often use the examples of taking risks, right? There's risks in everything we do, and there's no calculated outcome into those risks. We're just taking those risks, hoping for the best. And that's just how it is. And what I mostly use when I'm talking to clients or even potential clients, I said that it is a faith and a trust thing, right? You have to trust who you are, believe who you are. And even if you are that person that you think will be shameful, that is still you. that is points and places in your journey where mistakes have been made. And a lot of times we make mistakes and there's no lessons learned in those. But
Mhm.
mistakes are made to have lessons, and those lessons are learned to be applied. So we don't create or recreate those same lessons. And if we're vulnerable enough to understand this is me that's moving forward in this, I think we get a true understanding of what it is and who I am. And there's a power that has to be. There's a
Mhm.
power that must take place in that, and it's courage in doing that because we're taught so much against that, so much
Mhm.
against it.
Yeah, I actually just caught a TED talk from the CEO of Chobani Yogurt, and he was talking
I
about
like that
how,
yogurt.
so do I, which is probably why I stopped on it because it was breakfast time when I saw that come across my feed. But what he was talking about is, along the lines of what you're talking about, and he was saying like the CEO, the definition of a CEO, he was calling it the CEO handbook, is
Mm,
gone. The traditional CEO handbook of, I'm up here, my employees are down there, I tell them what to do, there's a separation, is gone. And his TED talk was on the CEO anti handbook. And it was about what you're talking about. It was about all of us being in it together. It was about leading through your own lessons. It was about, sharing your own human side with your employees, and recognizing that that is the CEO of today. That is the CEO that's going to be more successful and run a more powerful company. And, I think when it comes to vulnerability, what you mentioned, sharing your lessons, sharing the mistakes that you've made, that's where, when we look at course creation and creating courses, that's really what it's all about. When we look at, um when we look at who can create a course, anybody who has learned a life lesson should be creating something to get out there and to teach others. And for you, with vulnerability, I think it's a way to also stand out among many of the other people that are in the industry. Because, if you look at, and again, I'm just going to come from my own knowledge of courses I've taken, they're very, um, they're very uniform. They're very just like knowledge based. They're very like, here's what I know. But you said a word earlier, and that was like the relatability, right? Like, if how do we relate to vulnerability? I think also is, how do people relate to us when we show vulnerability? And I think that's the game changer. I think when we're looking at who wants to know, learn from you, who wants to hear what you have to say, who wants to buy your products, who wants to bring you in as a coach, it's going to be someone that's like, wow, I feel like I know them because they showed vulnerability. And so now there's more of a connection. And now I feel like there's more of a relationship. And in today's world, I really think that's the key to standing out, is to being able to show that vulnerability.
and using it to teach and using it to teach others, and
Mhm.
it moves us to our next point. And Robert had a great thing here that I wanted to highlight. He says it's kind of
Mhm.
the way business should have always been.
Yeah.
And it's a funny thing there because we have us as human beings, and we know that we have these characteristics and these traits that we all carry, but that we're so similar in them. And fear is definitely king in how we move, right?
Yes.
And it's how we do things, and it's how we're defined actually, because we see those as fearless doing the kind of things that others dream of doing because they're
Mhm.
fearful of, right? So when I imparted on this journey, there was lessons learned that had killed the fear factor from the beginning, and those lessons were the integrated parts of the journeys of which I had to overcome people constantly telling me that you don't know what you're talking about. And it was the determination to say, yeah, I do, that brought me to the point of saying that. And a lot of times we have that innateness in ourselves, and we don't always see that, or we don't always pursue that. And we have
Right.
others kind of dictate to us in the essence of how we are, whether it's spouse, whether it's job, manager, boss, relationship, We have a lot of things that we go that kind of cultivates how we even deal with being vulnerable. And a
Right.
lot of that has started, and I don't think that we really give it to the origin of which it comes from. A lot of it's come from us just growing up, us just childs,
Yeah.
us as being children, what we were able to show as an emotion, what were we able to discuss as feelings, what
Hmm.
we were able to perceive as our thoughts and our reactions to those thoughts.
Yeah.
And we wasn't allowed to live in those premises. So therein lies a lot of us when it comes to vulnerability, we're stuck at 6, 7, 8 years old
Yeah.
in the mental. And those are what is so hard to overcome. We have to learn to eliminate the judgment. But in the essence of that and how it should be, using vulnerability to teach others, I think is cornerstone. And I always do this, and I take a hit at I take a hit at Brene for this. Uh, and thinking about her when I thought about talking about this and doing this and starting on this trajectory, she came to mind, of course, because she talked about what I talk about. But I took it as a point of saying, how can she tell me? This is really what gave me. A lot of people may not know this, but this is really what gave me the unction to push forward.
Mm.
I say, how can she tell me about being vulnerable? How can she write these bestsellers? This is coming from a place of shade, as my friend Charlene would like to say that I say all the time. I was like, how can she tell me about being vulnerable? How can she just go and interview people, do research, have these meetings and these interviews with people and really learn about vulnerability, right? And I say, first and foremost, how can she tell me, a young African American man who was told I wouldn't be 25 years old, coming from the neighborhood that I came from,
Mm.
I wasn't going to live to be this kind of one, all of the obstacles and adversities that I faced and that I lived through as experiences. How is she going to explain this portion of vulnerability to me? And when I sat down in that, it was no answer. It was no answer because she couldn't.
Hmm.
And that took me on this journey of using it to teach others. And it's an independent journey, not from the basis of researching hundreds of people. It's individual experiences from that individual that will correlate and cultivate how you can use your vulnerability to teach others.
Yes.
And if it's nothing more than just explaining your story,
Yeah.
sharing your story empowers others. And I think that's the best way that we can see in the course relation and in course creation,
Hmm.
using vulnerability to teach others. How is that a structure that we can use on a platform? Just say as this, or even our own very own platform. How do you see that being used?
I think one of the things that vulnerability does is, and I still teach at the university level, and something that always comes back at the end of the semester on my reviews is they say, I love how she tells stories because that really makes her relatable and the content relatable. And I think that's key when it comes to any kind of education. Specifically, we're talking about online courses here. But, I always use this example. I say, nobody who wants to learn how to lose weight wants to lose weight from someone who has never gained weight in their life, right? They don't want to lose weight from the coach that says, I've always been thin and lean. I've always been able to eat what I want, but I'm going to help you
Lose weight,
figure
right?
out how to lose weight, right? That's not where we connect. We connect with someone that says, I get it. I've been there. I know what it feels like to feel uncomfortable in your clothes. I know what it feels like to feel like you're being judged or be embarrassed to go to the gym because you have to wear workout, right? Like, or
Mhm.
not want to get in a bathing suit on your family vacations because you're embarrassed. And that's what vulnerability is. That's really what vulnerability is. And most of us are going to go with that person because we're going to say they get it. They understand whether or not I'm able to express that emotion and those feelings, because maybe I'm not ready to be vulnerable yet, that allows me to have an instant human connection with that person. And
Mhm.
that's who I'm going to raise my hand to learn from. And, as you said, vulnerability is an independent journey. But when we tap into it, it really allows people to connect. And when in the space of everybody wants to be an expert, everybody has an online course. If I were to Google digital marketing online course right now, I'd come up with hundreds. But
Mhm.
what's going to help anybody stand out is going to be like, hey, this is where I was when I started digital marketing. I didn't know what SEO was. I ran a Facebook ad and I got 5,000 people from Latin America, even though my business is in the US, because I didn't know what I was doing, right? People want to hear those vulnerable moments so that they can say, yes, you've gone through it. Oh my gosh, that's what I want to avoid. And that instantly, I think, raises us up on the expert meter, if you will. It's someone that is vulnerable enough to share their story so that everyone in their community can say they're going to get it. They're going to get me and what my fears are and what I don't want to have to go through. And I think that's a key piece. And I think so many people are like, I just have to be businesslike and I just have to give all of my expertise. That actually makes them like everybody else out there. And so the vulnerability, the story, intermixed in online courses and teaching, being able to say, like, this is the first module. And before we get started, let me tell you a story about
Mhm.
this. That's what's going to keep people going through your course. That's what's going to help them complete it. That's what's going to help them say, what's next? Because now I feel like I know you because you've shared your story with me.
And it's made it so relatable. I often said, and a lot of times with teaching people about their vulnerability in the essence of, and I put it in such a way in a demeanor of saying the vulnerability. If you give people, I've noticed in dealing with people and giving them understanding of words and just my ability to use words and get you a definition of them. Sometimes if you break things down for individuals, they can see the vision, and
Hmm.
sometimes we look at this word as vulnerability as this big kind of like Red Robin Hood kind of thing, like it's the wolf in the forest.
Yep.
Because not only because the definition has pretty much add credence to that, our behavior has added credibility to that as
Hmm.
well. So
Hmm.
when you marry those two together, how we behave and what the dictionary definition tells us it has lent this great credibility to a myth in essence of that. And I say it's a myth, and now I don't discount that there's opportunities and places where you are hurt. There are places where people have taken advantage, but that is throughout everything, and
Yep.
that is within everything. Because when people see that opportunity, those that's going to take advantage are going to take advantage. And whether you're wise enough to catch them or not, you're going to be taken. I don't think it's nobody even watching on this show that has not been taken in something, right? In some kind of way, if you want to call it a scheme, you want to
Yep.
call it paying for something and you didn't receive value, or you want to talk about somebody put you in something, offered you something, and it was not up to par with what you expected from them. So there's a taking in that, but the risk, the reward outweighs the risk, because I
Hmm.
always say that you have the key in vulnerability. That is your key. No one can make a copy of that. No one can clone that key. So you do have the ability to lock out all those things that you think will harm you or harm you. But with that same key, you're locking out a lot of things that could propel you and grow you and
Hmm.
move you forward. And that's where the teaching comes in. Because if we allow it to let us to understand who we are, then when we make decisions, when we move forward, we know where we are, we know what we are, and
Hmm.
we'll be empowered by who we are, and it won't be a shame. When I think about life's travels, we pretty much travel along two roads. We either trying to fit in, which is a road that we all try to do, and all of that is troubled by what, guilt, shame, and those kind of things, or either we're belonging,
Hmm.
where we're in places and we're accepted as who we are. We don't have to fit in. Safe spaces are there. We can share our thoughts with people. Those are the two roads that life normally takes. And
Hmm.
in those, we've learned to kind of like juggle those. Okay, I'm at work now. Man, I'm gonna shut down. This is my fit in. I'm not gonna be authentic. I'm not gonna be, who I really am, and I'm not gonna be there. And then you go to the belonging. Oh, it's my family. They've been knowing me all along. This is how I am. And I always hated that, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde,
Hmm.
because I take me with me. So if I'm taking me with me, I want to be the same, and I want to have that affordable space and that courage where people will be able to be around me and they feel that my vulnerability is teaching them. So that's a great there. Now we transition to our third point, finding your vulnerability. And talking about vulnerability, and you talking from a course perspective, and I'm using vulnerability as an objective. How suitable is that for me to display that finding your vulnerability?
I think you talked about a key and what vulnerability can unlock for us. And one of the things that came to mind while you were speaking about that is it also unlocks for others. When I find my vulnerability and am willing to share it, and it could be something, of course it's all relative. Like I could be creating a, I don't know, I could be creating a micro course on why you need to 5 things to be visible, right? And when it comes to like my story, right, it's all about finding my story. What is going to set me apart that's going to make you want to buy my course on being visible, right? It's going to be my vulnerability. It's going to be, if it's deeply rooted, it might be like I've been invisible ever since I was a child. It might be something that is, when I stepped into this space, I was always in the shadows doing behind the scenes. And so, and I was afraid. But it's so key in really digging into that. I mean, I'm a firm believer that when someone has enough passion to create a course, it's because they have a story behind it, right? And the reason to find that vulnerability is to be able to share that story. And that's the draw. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we don't want to be in conversations or learn from people that have never gone through it. And so the finding your vulnerability is key, because I think it's a testament for why you are speaking about what you are speaking today. You know.
Yeah, and finding that vulnerability is just finding your story and
Mhm.
how that equates to someone else. Uh, and I always got my grandmother used to say that if we overcome by each other's testimonies. I know that's biblically based as well,
Mhm.
but we do. And the the paradox maybe, or the oxymoron to me understanding that, and how so many people understand that, how we continue to hide our story.
Mhm.
If we say we want to make impact, and we say we want to change lives, and we say we want to see things different, but we continue to harbor stories that could create those changes,
Yep.
we continue not to share those stories to create those changes, to make those impacts, to see people be able to overcome. And this is where I came to the empowerment of my story. And though I don't share it all the time in all ways, it has definitely been a defining thing for me in both spiritually and naturally. And it's definitely been empowering, where it's really shaken me to the core of, if I don't, someone will die. Now, can that be a dramatic take on my story so special? No, it's not really that. Because when I realized some things that I went through, some people are in that place. And some things that I overcome, some people are still struggling with. So once you come out of something, I do think it's your responsibility, whether you believe so or not,
Mhm.
that you should inform someone. I can't drive, and I know it's a pothole on Fifth Street, and I know you got to come on Fifth Street, and I
Yeah.
let you drive on Fifth Street, and I don't say anything about the pothole.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's not. I'm not necessarily saying that I'm my brother's keeper. What I am saying is that I have some knowledge that I can pass on that someone could benefit from.
Mhm.
Same with your story. There's
Mhm.
things and points and places in your story that people are struggling with right now, that they see no hope in, that
Right.
they see no light at the end of the tunnel. And without your version of story from where you've overcame it,
Yeah.
giving them hope to go through it, there's no understanding for that person to say, oh man, it's going to get better. This too
Mhm.
shall pass. It's just a storm. It's only a test. All of those cliches you want to use.
Yeah. What I love about what you just said? I think that is the core of why vulnerability matters. It's
Mhm.
it's recognizing that there are 100 people that maybe have learned the same lessons as you and I,
Hmm.
but my story is going to resonate with certain people, and my story is going to save someone from a heart-wrenching mistake or learning the hard way or whatever it is. And I think the biggest piece that and why people don't step forward and raise their hand and say, I have a life lesson that I would love to teach, is because they don't think their vulnerability matters. And I think that's the biggest key. And I think that's why what you talk about is so important. It's every single person watching this video has something that they've learned that is going to not just matter, but change the life of somebody else. And it's time to dig deep and to find that vulnerability. And it's time to say, it does matter, and to start sharing that. And that's how, you mentioned the pothole, and it's our contribution to the world, right? Like, maybe we aren't everybody's keeper, but isn't it our contribution to humanity to say, hey, if you go down this street, there's danger right there, right? We don't. So that's just, to me, embracing the idea that your vulnerability matters and committing to saying, it is my human responsibility to go and to share this, because somebody out there is probably praying for that lesson today.
Yeah, someone's definitely depending on it.
Hmm.
And this is where we get the real impact
Hmm.
that we would like to make. Because a lot of people have these grandiose ideas of how I could just be this just awesome person who makes impact, right?
Hmm.
And what I get such a fulfillment on is I get people in my DMs or people saying, you know what, you don't know me, I'm in your network, whatever. I've been following you for the longest. I had one that I often talk about. I never say his name, but I just thought it was a funny thing. This gentleman had been, he sent me a DM one time, and he said, "I love your work." He said, "But I was waiting on a change," and that was all that he wrote me in the DM. So
Hmm.
of course it's like that was a scroll stopper, right? It caught
Yeah.
my attention, and I was like, "Oh, what is this guy talking about?" So he said, "I watched all your stuff, and I've been following you," and that was part of his DM to me. So instead of going to him, I wanted, as a researcher does, I want to get some ammunition. So when I go to him in the conversation, I can say, "Oh, so you saw this about this, or you was at this show, or you was at that." I scoped by through my shows, right? And I didn't see him commenting anywhere. I didn't
Hmm.
see him nowhere on any show I had done. I didn't have the shows that I had been on other people's, but I went through every show that I had done. And it was so much to a point that it was just the curiosity was just eating at me. I was like, "Oh, where's this dude from? What did he saying? What?" So I couldn't find it. I went back to him. And I was like, "Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it." I laid it on. I talked about, I appreciate you following me, whatever. And I even put a couple of examples in there. I say that you probably thought about this, you probably thought about that, and this. And I said, "Yeah. So tell me, like, really what it was that resonated with you." And I left that as the question, as the end question. And he responded back to me that I was waiting on you to change. I was waiting on you to change. He said, "I've been watching you for over a year and I've been watching what you were saying and I was hearing what you were saying." He said, "But I was waiting on you to see if you would change what you were saying."
Hmm.
And I said, "Change what I'm saying?" I was like, "What do you mean? Like, we're going in DMs at this point. I want to zone with this guy." But
Hmm.
we're going through the DMs and I'm like, "I don't understand what you mean change." And after that, it was a little bit before he answered me, but he answered me back. He said, "Because I've seen so many people on these platforms
Yeah.
that have talked about so many things and I've kept up with things." So I was like, wow. First of all, I'm thinking like manic, kind of like I'm just like, what kind of guy am I dealing with here, right? But his stuff, what he said to me made so much sense. He said he had saw so much and heard so much of people were talking about this and that and this and that. And he said over the period of time, he saw changes in what they were saying and
Hmm.
how they were. And he said that I watched you for all about a year of your shows and being on other shows. And he said your message always been the same. He said it's never changed. And I said, "Well, you never said anything on the show." He said, "I watched." And he said that you should know that people are watching. And that was it. Now, I won't say his name, man. We didn't do a Zoom. We haven't connected. I've sent them
Hmm.
out and say, you want to chat or whatever. He hasn't responded. And I think to me, that was just saying that what you're doing is making a difference. It's
Hmm.
showing people why it matters. And for someone to spend that much amount of time following behind a message you have and not interacting in that message, but soaking it in to see if it would change, that really denotes to people are looking to be impacted.
Yeah, and I think that's the magic. I think finding your vulnerability is what allows you to stay consistent, to be on the same path, to be in alignment with what you teach. I mean, any of us who's paid attention to influencers, we know that a lot of times it's like, oh, they're talking about this now. Like a year ago, they were talking about this, and oh, they're doing this now, right? And it's confusing to those of us that are in their community. And I would imagine it's out of alignment for them. I think the most powerful influencers are the ones where you're like, man, they always talk about this, and you can just hear the passion in their voice, and their passion is contagious. And so we want to dive in and we want to learn too. And that's where vulnerability brings us, is being connected to our story, being committed to sharing it, and we stay on the same path. We have the core messages regardless of what we're talking about. We are the people that, others can recognize that this is our passion. And that's what sets us above in this crowded space of where everybody thinks they're an expert on X, Y, and Z. That is the key. The people that stand out, the people that are, others are watching, the people that are empowering others. It's the people who have recognized that their vulnerability matters and are willing to share it and are willing to allow that to be part of what they teach. And I think that's why you make such a big impact. I think that core authenticity of what we're able to show when we tap into that vulnerability, I think that's really what makes us stand out among the crowd.
And it gives me the strength as well because I know what it does. And it's just like anybody, right? When you know something and you're confident in it, I often use the chair analogy. I have faith in being vulnerable, right? And when people say, "Yeah, how do you have faith in being vulnerable?" That doesn't even make sense, right? No, it doesn't make sense to you. Probably never will, because you haven't embraced it. And that's why I talk about and teach about and try to put in all my messages in that if you're embracing something, that means it takes work too. Doesn't mean that it comes overnight so that you just come to this plateau and say, "Oh wow, I've made it." And that's why I harp so much on embracing vulnerability because there are going to be points and times that you want to give up. It's going to be points and times that you may not feel that it's worth it. But there's been so many times where a fork in the road was forced upon me, and I said, "Okay, this is the decision I have to make, and I'm going to lose friends over there." So I've lost jobs, I've lost promotions, I lost moving forward with
Mhm.
things that I wanted to do because my stand wasn't what everybody thought it should be.
Right.
And I've stood there and stayed with people, and I've trained people to take jobs that I wanted. And a lot of things has happened. So there came to be a protective layer that says, okay, being vulnerable, you're gonna have to use it as a shield. But using it as a shield, you're gonna be able to help others embrace it. And
Mhm.
those are sides of us that we have not been able to embrace, that we're fearful of embracing, and we do have a hard time trying to find
Mhm.
that spot. And fear keeps us from that and keeps us from a lot of things. Like fear and failure. I always say those are 1, 2 on the charts of stopping anybody from doing anything they want to do.
Right.
Fear and failure. Yes. So
Yeah,
we
I mean,
talking about we
go ahead.
talking about no, I'll say we talk about these courses and we talking about these courses coming up. And I'm excited to be working with you on my course and my micro courses. I will just explain a little bit about that because it's the upcoming course, and
Yeah,
this is your expertise here.
and
Like,
and the micro course is such a perfect answer to this conversation that we're having, because
mhm,
the idea of a micro course is really following the trend of micro learning. And micro learning is being able to teach something in under 15 minutes. If you look around at the TikTok world, Instagram Reels, Facebook just came out with Reels. Amazon now has a short read section. People are really wanting to learn things and to consume information, but gone are the days where people want to watch a 2-hour video or spend 10 hours of video watching in order to learn something. And so the micro course supports that trend in micro learning, and it's all about being able to create a course that has a series of lessons that are all under 15 minutes. And, I actually, as soon as we're done, I'm going to message you because I'm pretty sure this video needs to be a micro course also, with what you talked about in terms of why vulnerability matters, and just, talking about, hey, here's 5-10 minute videos on how vulnerability can benefit you and the people around you. And so, you have so much content, and there's so many levels and layers at which you talk about vulnerability, from the perspective of being a good leader to being an expert to empowerment, unlocking the keys to so many things that you're talking about. I'm sure everybody, as I mentioned, everybody watching has a vulnerable story where someone could watch that and go, okay, I'm going to do things differently. Like their story just changed the trajectory of where I'm going to go. And so, the micro course is a really easy way to do that, because it's just a series of 10 or 15-minute videos. Anybody who has, I had this happen to me, and here are the 3 things that learned. That's literally can be a micro course. And so they're a really quick and easy way to get content out. For people like you who have so much content, it gives them a lot of flexibility to be able to create a number of different micro courses for their audience. And I'm just super excited to get all of your stuff out there, because as I mentioned, there's so many layers, and there's just so much that people can learn about themselves and about how they can help others through vulnerability, how they can be better leaders, how they can support the people around them. That your stuff is going to be super exciting. Super exciting.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Thank you, Valerie, for coming by. I'm absolutely stoked at what the transformation that will take place, because a lot of times you have these thoughts in your mind and these visions of how things should be, and sometimes we have these conversations with others, and I've had so many conversations along the course line, right, that I just put out, just had my little on vision of what it should be. But I think the biggest takeaway that I've taken away with working with you and getting an understanding of the levels to this, and once I start talking and really start going through uh the knowledge of what I know, my
Yeah.
vulnerability has transformed me in so many ways that I'm so comfortable with using it and helping
Mhm.
others to understand it. And even in leadership with companies and executives, and even how those things come into play with how my confidence is teaching those ones that it's not about the weakness. And if there was ever a word that I really would want to ban from dictionary terminology, would definitely be weakness,
Yeah.
because I think it has given a lot of us with the empowerment. It has taken a lot of our empowerment, and it's also given those who are seeking places to hide a place to hide, and we hide behind the weaknesses. And a lot of the weaknesses are self directed, or either directed by others. There,
Yeah.
other people have told you these things, and you've taken on these things as a married couple, and you hanging on to the old ball and chain, as they used to say when I first got
Mhm.
married, right? They say you hanging on, and you have this meaning that is not for you, it's not applicable to you, but you're carrying it with you.
Yeah.
And these are understandings that we fail to really delve into ourselves with. And it all starts with the evaluation of you. Because I had to sit at the table, my own self, and say, okay, who am I?
Hmm.
Not who I thought the values of what I was taught was,
Yep.
not the parents that gave me all of this knowledge from raising was. not even the jobs and the schooling, all of those other things that have kind of like shaped our life's journey. All of those things are just components to who you are.
Mhm.
And if you don't sit down with yourself and get an understanding of who you are, put those in all of the applicable spaces and say, okay, these are my values. Based upon all of this I've experienced, based
Mhm.
upon all this who I am, I've done an evaluation of self and I said, this is who I am. Now, my next level is to not let this anyone else bring anything else to me that's not part of this, who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where I got the power from. And that's what empowered me. It didn't matter to me what you said about me anymore.
And that's where it becomes empowering. You were talking, and I'm thinking about, all of the life experiences that I've gone through, that at some point I probably viewed myself as weak or viewed those things as weaknesses. But when you sit down and when you actually say, who am I, right? All of these stories end up becoming like the ingredients to a recipe. And when you sit down and just they're like, what is that final product? What does it look like? I think that's where you can stand in your power. And that's where you really recognize that your stories and your vulnerability matters. And I also think that's where you can access them. I have stories that I don't tell everywhere, but because I know them and I know they're part of my makeup, I can access them when it becomes time to say, like, I think I can support this person by sharing my vulnerability in this moment. And that's where you become powerful. You can become powerful when you can, as a leader, as an expert, as a mentor, when you can say, like, I've been through that and let me share my story so that I can change the way you see that or change the way that you do things. And you don't have that powerful access unless you, like you said, you sit down at the table with yourself and you say, who am I and how has this made me who I am today? So I think that's so powerful. And I want you to tell everybody how they can get on your list for all of those amazing upcoming courses that we're working on.
Yes, you guys could go and to my website, carlshawatkins.com. Go on there and sign up. And we get the upcoming courses for you. No, we don't have names for them, but believe me, I'm coming up with names. But I got Kelly is working on this and tremendous person to work with, so authentic and so exciting. When I talk about vulnerability and I talk about what it means to me, it's always exciting to me and always exciting. It's like you turn a light bulb on in me when you talk about that subject, man. We can go for days. I can talk about it, but talking to you about it and seeing your excitement in
Mm-hmm.
it as well as mine has just really made this what we're going to do so fabulous. So you guys go and check out that when we get articles that are going to be coming out with it. Look me up on LinkedIn as well. Follow my content, Carl S. Watkins one. Definitely there if you don't know it. Also check out Kelly Tenney. If you think that you have a knowledge base and you're really unsure as to how to get it out there, she can help you word it out. She can help you outline it. She's curriculum, guys. For all my student scholars out there,
Yeah.
there's a difference between the course taking a couple of videos, three little questions at the end, and a certificate. We're talking about curriculum where we're building a journey, and this is what this course is going to be. These micro courses, and I hadn't heard that term before then. And I'm
Mm.
just not a course guy, so it's not like it's the end of the world because I haven't heard of it. But I had not heard of it into the way that she puts it out of what I have to offer and putting together those. It's just phenomenal that the understanding that can be gotten. And this is what we're all here for. We're here to learn. We're here to understand. Kicking this vulnerability matters series off because we're going to be talking about a lot of things that are going to be vulnerability related, growing you, helping you to embrace it, the information, getting it out to you, and having an understanding of knowing why your vulnerability matters. So you definitely look out for that and come and check us out. Come and check
Yeah.
us out because we're here. So we thank everybody that has came by. We appreciate all of you all. that have came by. For those who are going to tune in on the hashtag replay, please drop any comments or questions that you have in the chat so we can go back. I do go back and watch everything that I'm on, and I interact with everyone that has been there. So that's how I found that guy. I was looking for him. I never found him, but I do go back to all of my stuff and see, because we want to be doing things that are making impact. I didn't choose this platform to be on here to just talk about me. I chose this platform to give you my story and to see that your story may have the ups and downs, the highs and lows, or the valleys and peaks that mine did. It is just that much important because it's your story.
Yeah.
No one can change that. And your story can help someone overcome.
Mhm.
So until the next time, we thank you guys for coming out. This has been beautiful. Kelly, thank you again
Thank you.
for coming out and hanging out with me and giving me some of this vulnerability matters love. And we see you guys next time. Have a great Tuesday afternoon.
Bye
Peace.
bye.